For more, we're joined by Father Lawrence Ndlovu, Administrator of the Cathedral of Christ Church, and Pastor Geert Khosa, General Secretary of the International Federation of Christian Churches, who are joining us both, of course, to have the reflections on this conversation. Father Ndlovu, thank you so much for coming through. And I wonder, for you, as, of course, a member of the Catholic Church, how are you processing this huge loss?
Well, you can only imagine how colossal the loss is for the entire Church. Pope Francis has become a very important voice, not only internally in the Church, but also in society in general. And so to lose that authority in this way, yes, he has been unwell, and very unwell at that. But I think we were not quite anticipating that the first day of the Easter octave, after the very busy season, and he appeared just yesterday in public. So we were very surprised in as far as that is concerned, but equally consoled. It happens that he passes during Easter time, carrying with all the hope of the resurrection and the stories of restoration and so on. So the Church is indeed saddened, but not particularly devastated, because he's worked his entire life for the longing for the fullness of the kingdom of God. And as the statement said earlier on today, he's made his way to the house of the Father.
And for you, Pastor Geert, as I bring you into this conversation, how is the IFCC processing the loss of such a huge figure, not only for the Catholic Church, for many, who just are Christians around the world?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Bongiwe. I think for us, we need to start first by saying condolences to the global Catholic Church, the Southern Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church here at home, the Bishop there, and the Christians around the world. As we reflect as IFTC, we remember him so much about his work fostering unity among religious leaders, the interfaith approach to him. And secondly, is his humility. If you read up his work, and humility and how he approached things. So as IFCC, we send condolences, because it's not only a Catholic loss, it's a loss for us as Christians across the world.
And Father, when you listen to what Pastor Geert has to say there, I'm going to borrow from his blessing yesterday, what he said. He says, may the principle of humanity never fail to be the hallmark of our daily actions. In the face of the cruelty of conflicts that involve defenseless civilians and attacks schools, hospitals and humanitarian workers, we cannot allow ourselves to forget that it's not the targets that are struck, but persons, each possessed of a soul and human dignity. It speaks to his fight for social justice, which he spoke about until the very end.
He was quite a champion for human rights, and he operated from a very human place. And I think that was his particular feature, that it is very easy to forget that all these activities, horrible as they are, involve real human beings. And he asked that of us, even as priests who are working directly in parishes. He said, priests should have the smell of the sheep, shepherds should have the smell of the sheep, demanding of us to be far more involved in our engagements, particularly in social justice. The particular feature of Pope Francis, and I think his particular contribution, is that these calls for social justice, inclusivity, equality, the advancement of justice and peace, and so on, are very much part of the fabric of Christian life itself. These are not just peripheral issues or should be left to politicians and so on. They irk at the very fiber of our faith as well. So the absence of these, the absence of justice, the absence of peace, equality, inclusion, is an indication of a decaying faith. And so that is quite a powerful testimony that he has given to the world, that your way of prayer and your way of life and your way of making decisions affecting people's lives every day is also part of your faith testament. And I think that's very powerful.
And Pastor Geert, when you speak about, his love for people and how he would cross denominations, there's also something that Father Ndlovu is talking about here. And this is the statement that has stuck with many of us throughout the course of today, when he said, shepherds must have the smell of the sheep and grounded in the situation of their flock. And it speaks to the church today as to how the church needs to play a bigger role in a lot of the struggles of people today.
Absolutely. The Pope has left us a huge challenge to the church in general, particularly standing for the marginalized, poverty, justice, as Father has explained there. So not only that, we need to rise to the occasion as a church, one, for unity of the church, two, to fight for the marginalized. But just whenever he releases a statement, wherever he spoke, when he had come to speak before the illness, he will talk about the issue in Gaza that we touched on earlier, that he will keep, and there must be peace. These are human beings. So us as a church, the church leaders, the religious leaders, we have the challenge to emulate his example for peace, for justice, and to ensure that our faith emulates the work of Christ as the Pope has shown.
It speaks about the courageous role that he's had to play, taking over the church during such a difficult time.
He was a very brave man, and I think some of the statements, of the things that he said would surprise all of us in the life and challenge all of us equally. The church, left to its own insouciance, can become inward-looking and forget its particular role that it can play in society and in the transformation of people's lives. I mean, if you think about all the work that he did in the areas of refugees, his passion for the people, the suffering people of Palestine, he's the first pope to appoint a woman as the head of the dicastery, a department of the Vatican, a very important role, and many other such acts. He was, as my colleague says, interested in the lives of the marginalized. In fact, those in the periphery ought to be considered, as he said. The periphery is the new center of the church. The silent voices are the ones that we need to hear more. We need to visit our people where they are. He was indeed a brave man who led from the front, not without criticism, but he knew what he wanted to begin, and he probably had a sense from the very beginning that this is the movement that the church ought to be taking. He mightn't be there to see it through, but it has begun.
And Pastor Geert, then, it speaks about working across denominational lines as the church, and simply not dividing one's self to staying with your own denominations, but simply just working together, I suppose?
Our faith should bind us to humanity. The things that affect the people that we lead, the things that pains the people that we lead, the things that disadvantage the people we lead, should unite us from different types of faith, because we all want humanity to be in unity. We all want peace. We all want justice. So Paul showed us that when we work together, regardless of our belief, when the things that affect humanity, when it affects us as leaders, church leaders, religious leaders, and we come together, that's when we make progress in life. So exactly the question that you have asked, this example that has said, should unite us more as we move forward, as we take his legacy forward, should unite us as different faith to work for peace and justice.
Father, what happens now?
What happens now is, of course, activities across the world. All parishes, all cathedral churches have now invited the people of God to be coming and offering prayers for the repose of the soul of Pope Francis. In Rome, of course, the preparations for the funeral of Pope Francis are now taking place, and the cardinals across the world are beginning to look at how they're making their way to the city of Rome to mark, of course, the funeral. He's asked to be buried at the Basilica of Mary Major, which is not in the Sixtine Chapel like most popes are, because he had a very great devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And that's the cathedral church he visited every time he left, if he was going on pilgrimage or visiting a country, and every time he came back. It's the basilica he went to after he was discharged, before going home first. And shortly after that, the preparations for the conclave, of course, will take place about 15 days or so later, and of course the actual conclave. But the church right now is in its 9 days of straight mourning, observing this time of reflecting this great pontificate, but also praying for the church herself that is going through yet another transition. It is an important time for us to pray in ardent, because the people of God are the church. And that is why every church has been encouraged to be open, and official masses will be celebrated. Certainly one that is coming up this week before His Eminence Cardinal Stephen Brislin leaves for Rome. He will celebrate a mass at the Cathedral of Christ the King as his official mass for the Archdiocese of Johannesburg and the faithful. We will be getting, I suppose, a lot of updates about what is expected, but he will be lying in state as all popes have been doing, of course slightly different. He's adjusted those last rites and so on that pertaining to the funerals of popes. But the church is in mourning, in prayer, but not wailing, not without hope.
All right. Father, condolences to you, and thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate your time. And that was Father Lawrence Ndlovu, the administrator of the Cathedral of Christ the King Church, as well as Pastor Geert Khosa, General Secretary of the International Federation of Christian Churches. Let me thank you both for your time, and we'll continue to bring you more reaction.